and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Ann Northrup, and
I'm Chris Cooper, sitting in for Andy Hum, who's on vacation.
But we'll be back next week. Whoops, let's fix this tabletop or we're going to spill everything. Thank you. Well, I feel like I didn't even need to get up from this desk in the last week because all I've been doing is all Russia all the time. We spent a lot of time on it last week, but it's only getting bigger, and so we're going to walk you through everything that's happened in the last week, everything that's going to happen, particularly next Wednesday, August 14th, a big Queer Nation town meeting here in New York at 7 p.m. at the LGBT Center on West 13th Street. We'll repeat this as we go along, but we want you there Wednesday, 7 p.m., big Queer Nation town meeting.
In other news, out gay State Senator Ed Murray has taken the lead in the race for the Seattle mayoralty.
Final vote in November, but he seems to have gotten the most votes in the primary. In New Jersey, the Supreme Court is taking up the case of same-sex marriage again. There are specific details about why. But Governor Christie's team came up with the craziest reasons for why the court should not declare an immediate right to same-sex marriage.
Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, a second county has embarked on renegade marriages. So this is good news from our perspective, but the state is still making moves to shut them down. We'll bring you up to date on that.
They're going crazy in Pennsylvania.
They are.
And maybe in Thailand, Vietnam, and Ecuador, too, all of which have marriage movements underway that may produce results in the near future.
In the light of meningitis scare here in New York, our Governor Cuomo has signed legislation that will allow pharmacists to administer the meningitis vaccine, which is great news.
Very good news. As you may have heard, the Oscars are going gay again. They are turning to Ellen DeGeneres to host for a second time.
And in the spirit of Andy, who's not here, and he usually does movie reviews.
Theater reviews.
Theater reviews. My particular passion is movie reviews, and I will bring you a few recommendations on what you can do in August that's worth seeing and what's not worth seeing.
If we can manage to save time to get to that, because lately we've been running out of time.
Exactly. So let's get to it.
Let's get to Russia and try to run through what's happened. Well, I'm going to start some with what the current situation is and then go back over some of the happenings of the last week. No one could have been more surprised than all of us last night, as we were taping on Wednesday, to turn on The Tonight Show and see the President of the United States being grilled by Jay Leno on what's going on with the repression of gay people in Russia.
It's kind of mind-boggling. You know, we keep getting these signposts that we've arrived, like, oh, our marriages are federally recognized. Oh, we matter enough that Jay Leno is going to talk about us and ask the president about us. It's always a good thing, but it's still thrilling, astonishing.
It is thrilling, and this Russia stuff has just broken in the last month, and the fact that we have gotten so big so fast on this indicates, first of all, what an important issue this is, how it just resonates all over the world and with everybody, and that we can ramp this up fast enough to try to have an effect. But the question is what effect we can have, what we're really asking for, and what we have a chance of accomplishing.
Well, Ann, will that be part of what you'll be discussing at the Queer Nation meeting on Wednesday?
Yes. If we can throw up that graphic about the Queer Nation meeting now, I would like that. We're going to repeat that several times during the show just to keep you up to date on that. So
it's a great graphic.
It is. What it does, while they're trying to find it and throw it up there, I'll tell you, it's the Olympic rings in handcuffs, which is quite a stunning image. I'm not sure whether they're getting to that yet. So I'll tell you what's been happening in the last week. And then we'll get to the, are we talking about boycotting the Olympics? Are we talking about moving the Olympics? Oh, there it is. It's quite a striking image. Queer Nation Town Meeting next Wednesday night, 7 p.m., LGBT Community Center here, 208 West 13th Street. Everyone is encouraged to attend. The idea is that there have been about a dozen of us here in New York working on stuff. We want to broaden it out. We know lots of people want to get involved and want to do something, so we're trying to provide the space to do that, turn it over to everybody who wants to be involved, and divide up the work so we can get a lot more done. Because we need to go after the corporate Olympic sponsors. We need to go after the corporations that do major business in Russia. We need to go after the International Olympic Committee more. We need to go after the U.S. Olympic Committee. We need to go after the Congress. All of this is work that needs to be done.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before the show, is the difference between how this issue is being approached and how the laws in Uganda were approached. And it's because the countries are so different, the levers of power that one can apply to them seem to be different. I mean, it seems to be much more grassroots, the approach to the Russian laws, whereas with Uganda, it was the governments applying the levers of power because they had the levers of power,
right,
and they were willing to use them. Uganda's in a very different position in the world stage than Russia. Russia is so big and has so many interests, and so many people are interested in maintaining their interests in that country, that even when they do have levers of power, the governments aren't, and the corporations aren't necessarily interested in using them. So that's why I think the grassroots is playing a much bigger part in this protest than it was in Uganda. I mean, Uganda, what are you going to boycott? Whereas you can at least, pour Russian vodka down the drain. So
exactly. But we have had success in Uganda in stalling the Kill the Gays bill, even while gay people are still under attack there, and the rhetoric is still very bad. They have not taken the steps they have threatened to take, and so there has been some pressure appropriately applied there. All right, Russia. To review, some months ago, individual cities in Russia started passing laws saying that it was illegal to say anything positive about homosexuality because that would warp children and really would be counter to the religious fervor having a resurgence in Russia, and be counter to their problem with the falling birth rate. They were going to blame us, and really it's all a distraction from their poor economic situation.
So basically a no promo homo law.
Exactly. No promo homo, no say gay, whatever you want to call it. And this became a crusade in Russia, and the result was that with this attitude out there, let alone the laws, gay people were under attack. We're being prevented from gathering publicly, having a film festival, having a pride parade, getting beaten up, getting arrested, getting jailed, getting thrown out of the country, etc. And as this started city by city, it grew and was passed as a national law at the end of June with the full support of Putin, and the rebellion around the world to that has now started and grown. So here's what's happened in the last week since last we spoke to you. First of all, today, Obama did cancel his meeting with Putin. Now, this is because of them giving asylum to Edward Snowden. It's because of our fights with them on Syria and Iran and Afghanistan. But human rights for LGBT people in Russia are part of that agenda. And Obama talking about it publicly on The Tonight Show this week was a big step forward and a big move on his part to get behind this movement. Leno, who was tutored by Harvey Fierstein on this when Harvey appeared on his show a couple of weeks ago, is expressing outrage at the very idea that this could be happening. Hey, Jay.
He got it a little wrong. He said they've made being gay illegal, which is not quite what they've done, but close enough. They made being gay publicly illegal, basically.
Exactly, which almost amounts to the same thing. They haven't quite gone into people's homes yet to round them up, but they are going into people's homes.
Well, that's one of the laws that's on deck, is
Yeah.
possibly a law to take away children from
Right.
from those perceived as gay.
So then the Olympics got to be part of the discussion because they're scheduled, the Winter Olympics, Sochi, Russia, February. And would people got on this, would gay people at the Olympics, athletes or spectators, be safe there? And our answer was, look, the Olympics are brigadoon. No one's going to attack people at the Olympics. The point is the people of Russia and the LGBT people of Russia, will they be safe? And all this nonsense from the IOC or the USOC or anybody about, well, you must protect our athletes. Please, talk about the people of Russia. So we're all saying, no, they're not going to bother with the Olympics. They want the Olympics to be a showcase. And then the Russia sports minister last week says, oh, no, we're not suspending this law for the Olympics. If there are people who are violating the law at the Olympics, we're going to arrest them, too, and deport them.
Except in the next breath, like maybe 2 days later, the deputy of Russian sports and culture said, oh, no, the Olympics are a special thing that we won't mess with at all.
So that became something of a tip-off to us that things were beginning to get confused and defensive over there. There has been the fight over Stoli vodka. Is it Russian? Is it Latvian? People getting very defensive about that.
A Latvian gay group has said, no, it's a Latvian product. Please don't boycott it, to which Queer Nation responded, look, it's made with Russian products. They've promoted themselves as a Russian vodka, so we're sticking with our boycott.
Yes. Canada has been very progressive in its governmental reaction to all of this. Their foreign affairs minister came out and specifically blasted the law. The Canadian government says it's had 8 meetings with the Russian government. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes meeting going on, both with the Olympic officials and with governmental officials from around the world, meeting privately with Russian government officials, trying to work something out where everybody can save face in this. No solution to that yet. But they may very well come out again with this thing about protecting people at the Olympics. That is not sufficient. We must continue to push for the protection of LGBT people in Russia, for their ability to be public and safe and be respected, and for the repeal of all these laws, the national law and the individual city laws. To protect people at the Olympics is not enough and is insulting to the people of Russia.
Now, Ann, even with all the pressure, which admittedly is not necessarily that much, that can be brought on the Russian government, do you think, even if the Olympics get moved, even if, or if that were to happen, do you think that would actually cause them to change anything? Or my fear is that would cause just a tremendous fearsome backlash against gay people even further. And I know we were talking about that a little bit, but your take on that?
I think look, there are Russian LGBT people who are totally behind all the calls for boycotts.
And there are those who are
I was about to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, there are others with a different point of view who say don't boycott. There are people who are worried about a backlash, and there are people who say, no, the best way to protect LGBT people in Russia is to keep the pressure on, keep the international spotlight on this. That is the best protection you can have. Do I know exactly what's going to happen? No, I don't. But my experience over my many years of watching many of these things is keep the pressure on. And I would offer as one analogy, South African apartheid. The boycott of South Africa was a painful, long period of disinvestment in South Africa, exclusion of South Africa from the Olympics for 30 or 40 years, and painful conversations about, doesn't this hurt the black population of South Africa? Isn't this, and doesn't it produce that backlash against them? And isn't this depriving them of economic opportunities for advancement? And in the end, the campaign against apartheid worked.
But in that example that you just gave, the anti-apartheid activists in South Africa were all pretty much uniformly in favor of the boycott, of the sanctions.
Yes.
So, and that's not what we're seeing yet in Russia, not yet.
Well, first of all, this is the first few weeks,
Right.
not 40 years. And I don't remember well enough to know what the first few weeks of discussions of that kind of boycott were in South Africa. Certainly I remember the debate around the world about it. And I would say that the majority, and I have seen the discussions of all LGBT Russians on all sides of this, I still think the majority of LGBT Russians at this point are supporting all the international work against the Putin government, however it is taking place. And there seems to be, if there's a consensus opinion at this point, I'd say it's move the Olympics, which people would tell you is impossible, ridiculous, fairy tale, a
Very
fantasy.
unlikely.
Certainly unlikely. But I would also say if the International Committee, Olympic Committee, thought it had a good enough reason to move the games, if nuclear war was breaking out in Russia and they thought they had to move the games, they could move the games. They could move them to Vancouver, where they were 4 years before. A lot of the facilities are still available. They would find a way to do it. So the question is, can we make it urgent enough for them to do it?
All right.
But even if that is a fantasy, continuing to press for that keeps the pressure on and makes this urgent enough for them to do something. Actually, my favorite suggestion, built on things like the South Africa model, is that Russia, as a violator of the International Olympic Committee charter, because it discriminates against its citizens, should be banned from competing.
Had its own Sochi Olympics.
Yes, that is really what I would like to see happen.
All right, well, let's get through some more of what's been going on there. You mentioned Canada. I just want to add there was also a march in Toronto of, I think, about 100 people to the Russian consulate there. So they're really all over this in
And
Canada.
Gilbert Baker, inventor of the rainbow flag, is on his way to Montreal right now to be the Grand Marshal of the Montreal Pride Parade, and he's meeting with Olympians there who are having a float in the Pride Parade that will condemn the Russian homophobia. Coca-Cola, one of the major Olympic sponsors who we will be going after, come to the meeting next Wednesday at the Community Center. We'll talk about Coke. They issued a statement. Coke does not take positions on political matters unrelated to our business, but we do not condone intolerance of any kind.
That's sort of classic of the tepid response that all corporations and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, we keep using that initial without explaining it, have been giving in response to the whole Russian situation.
It is so heinous, and they cannot be allowed to get away with that.
Well, and so heinous it even made the New York Times. Again, the level to which, the level of coverage that this has been getting, this is like the third or fourth article on this issue in the Times.
Yes. Very good sports section article today about the history of this and about how the International Olympic Committee failed to speak up when any of these laws were being created in Russia.
And it also mentioned how the IOC has its own political agenda going on because the current president of the IOC, Rogue, is that his name? Rogi, is outgoing. Jacques Rogi, thank you. He's going out, and so all these other presidents and contenders from the various national IOCs or various national Olympic committees are vying for the next presidency of the IOC. So they all are taking a little bit of a kid glove stance, which is
plenty of politics internally in the IOC.
Yeah.
The U.S. Congress, Senator Ed Markey, Senator of Massachusetts, Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, calling for congressional resolutions to condemn the laws. So the U.S. Congress getting behind that. Big vodka dumps. I told you a week ago I had just arrived from the New York one at the Russian consulate. They've now taken place in San Francisco and Philadelphia and all over.
Don't omit the fact that there was another vodka dump here in New York, not by gay bars. It was actually by the New York Restaurant Association, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
In other words, it's gone beyond just gay people dumping vodka in the sewer. It's just a general restaurant and liquor association here in New York.
They called us, the New York City United Restaurant and Tavern Owners, which represents 3,000 bars in New York City, decided when they heard about this that they were outraged and they were going to do their own event. And so we rushed over there to join them, but that was provoked on their own. You're absolutely right. All Winter Olympic sports federations. You know, there's a skiing federation and a speed skating federation, all that. They all have very strong anti-discrimination rules, and they should be speaking out on this and doing something. But nothing from them yet. We'll undoubtedly be going after them. There's supposed to be a big demonstration in London this weekend on the 10th. Stockholm at the Russian embassy, hundreds in Toronto. You're right, West Hollywood had a big one. The new mayor of Los Angeles, Garcetti, supports suspending the sister city relationship with St. Petersburg. There's a lot of that going on. 83 members of the House of Representatives wrote a letter to Secretary of State Kerry saying that the laws were threatening and bad.
Unfortunately, they focused in that letter on, protecting our athletes.
Yes. And then the IOC discovered that on its website they had, in a little FAQ section, they had said, it's all right to say that's so gay, because that's just a little colloquialism.
Yeah, a little colloquial street talk.
They have taken that off the website. We have had an effect. All right, celebrities. Lady Gaga is tweeting about Russian violence.
Well, and specifically, she responded to the fact that the Russian government, or someone in the Russian government, and I should have that in front of me, unfortunately I don't, said that Gaga and Madonna should be arrested.
The guy who co-sponsored the law.
In St. Petersburg, I
Yes.
believe. Yes, the guy who got the ball rolling in St. Petersburg, which is where a lot of this started. And he said, oh, well, Gaga and Madonna should be arrested for violation of the law. And Gaga tweeted back, hey, you had me. You could have done it then. Why didn't you make your move?
They talked about it when they were performing there last year. Madonna did a whole big gay thing when she was performing in Russia. They talked about arresting her and charging her, and that came to nothing. And, now he's trying to do it retrospectively. Michael Petrellis got Ian McKellen to speak out against this and hold up a sign. We have the picture of them in Berkeley. It's Petrellis on the left, Ian McKellen next to him, Mike's boyfriend next, and who's the other guy? Sean Matthias, director of No Man's Land, the play Ian McKellen's appearing in. So they did a little thing, and then McKellen put it on his website, where 750,000 people are following him or watching him.
And George Takei added his voice to arguing that the Olympics should be moved out of Sochi, which I want to point out, as a full-fledged bona fide geek, Russians do not stand a chance. They have the power of Magneto and Gandalf and the USS Enterprise against them. It's done. It's done. It's over.
And in Andy's honor, as an Anglophile, Stephen Fry has also announced his opposition to this. One of the stories that came out this week, it's not fully confirmed yet, but this puts a very serious cast on it. We've been telling you about how young LGBT Russians were being lured on websites by right-wing thugs and then harassed and tortured, and there was a picture that was put up of one of them, of a couple of thugs bragging about the fact that they were torturing this kid, and there was a story this week that kid has now died. Again, not fully confirmed, but certainly, you see the whole attitude right here.
What is confirmed is that Russian paratroopers violently attacked a lone, in St. Petersburg, violently attacked a lone LGBT activist, Kryl Kalugin, who was just standing there holding up a rainbow flag, which said, this is propagating tolerance. That's it. Yeah. And some paratroopers jumped him and were beating him until the riot police pulled them off.
And of course, who is speaking out in favor of the Russian laws? The U.S. right wing.
Yep.
In league with, these right-wing evangelicals are just thrilled and saying this is great news that Russia is cracking down on gay people.
They are wishing it had happened here.
There is a website in Russia for people who are HIV positive. The hosting company blocked the website twice, censored an educational pamphlet there, and told the group of HIV positive people, you violated the terms of our service. And so the group said, how? What terms did we violate? No answer.
And this website specifically said that they were only for 18 and over, which is what this law is supposed to be about, keeping a homosexual propaganda away from children.
Right.
So.
Chris Quinn has gotten all the New York state LGBT elected officials to write a letter to Obama asking him to cancel his whole Russian trip. Well, we told you he did cancel the meeting with Putin. Behind the scenes meetings, Jean-Claude Killy turns out to be, the old French skier, turns out to be a high Olympic official. He's one of the ones negotiating behind the scenes with the Russians. But it's also true that the IOC charter forbids any kind of political expression by athletes or spectators or anyone. So all this talk, as Frank Bruni did in the Times this week, and as a lot of people are suggesting, of wearing rainbow pins or waving rainbow flags, is going to get athletes kicked out of the games.
Well, I wonder if maybe the IOC would choose to look the other way under these circumstances.
Interesting question. My prediction is that they're not going to be very happy to say okay to that. I think the only possibility of that is at the closing ceremonies, where suddenly all formality is given up, the games are over, it's all about people milling together on the field and doing this very informal celebration, and I can see people waving rainbow flags there. But to me, so what? That doesn't make the same political point as doing it throughout the Olympics.
Well, in another indication of the deterioration of things in Russia, a regional minister in the Legislative Assembly of the Trans-Baikal Parliament has called for a law that would allow the public whipping of gay people in public squares by, quote, Marines.
That's the gayest thing I've ever heard. Sorry, I don't mean to be flip about that. Russian authorities are calling in gay journalists and activists to police stations for questioning. This is how the crackdown is currently proceeding, is to intimidate people and restrict their movement and in fact they are going to their houses and taking them out of there and calling them in for threatening kinds of conversations and asking them about all their activities and all their contacts and all their personal information. So that's taking place. And Masha Gessen, who was an activist here from Russia and moved back to Russia some years ago and is very active there as a journalist and really a terrific writer and terrific person, wrote a very interesting piece that ran on the International Herald Tribune site and I think now on the New York Times site about something called the Garden District of Moscow, which is the sort of upscale district, and how a bunch of people went out to dinner, a straight couple and their friends who were a gay couple, and they just had dinner in the restaurant. And other patrons in the restaurant, when they perceived that there was a gay couple there, verbally attacked them, forced them out of the restaurant, started physically attacking them. This is the kind of thing that's starting to happen in Russia. This isn't, this is not a joke. This is the entire atmosphere. This is how publicly perceived LGBT people are being treated in Russia. And this will only grow unless we can find a way to stop this.
It is very reminiscent of the way us black people used to be treated when we sat at lunch counters we weren't supposed to sit at.
And certainly still happens in this country to black people, to people perceived as illegal aliens. I put quotes around that. This happens all over the world. There's no question that nobody gets off free on this.
The difference is that here it's legally sanctioned, basically.
In here meaning Russia.
Russia, yeah, in this case.
And there is a movement among Russian teenagers to support gay teenagers, and they've started this online campaign where they're calling gay teenagers 404 kids because of the internet thing that pops up that, error 404.
Page not found.
Yes.
Right.
And so they're saying these kids are invisible, and so they're calling them 404 kids.
It reminds me of the Just Say Takei movement that George Takei started when they were going to say, you can't say gay, and I think it was Tennessee schools.
Yeah.
And very reminiscent of that.
All right, I think I have. I'll tell you one more time, and I'd like to put up the graphic again. Queer Nation meeting next Wednesday, August 14th, 7 p.m. at the LGBT Community Center here in New York, 208 West 13th Street. This is where this will take off in New York as a big movement with lots of things for people to do, going after all angles of this. So please come to the community center at 7 p.m. next Wednesday night for the Queer Nation meeting. Maybe I'll repeat that at the end of the show, but let's move on to other news.
All right.
All right, well, in New Jersey, all right, some years ago, the New Jersey Supreme Court said that same-sex couples are entitled to the same rights as opposite-sex married heterosexual couples. But they said, we're not going to force the legislature to call it anything particular. We'll leave it up to them. And the legislature, in their wisdom, said, oh, okay, we're not going to call it marriage. We'll make it civil unions.
But what the New Jersey State Supreme Court said was we're reserving the right to revisit this issue to make sure that there is indeed equality, no matter what you call it, between these two forms of unions.
And so there were studies done of civil unions which determined that people were not treated equally in civil unions. The legislature went back and passed a marriage law, but Christie vetoed it, and there's not yet a 2/3 majority in the legislature for marriage, although they're still trying to put that together. But meanwhile...
2/3 to override the veto, Christie's veto.
Thank you. Meanwhile, we've gone back to the Supreme Court and said we want a summary judgment from you that civil unions are not sufficient, and mandating that marriage must be made legal for same-sex couples.
The reason why they've gone back to court for the summary judgment is because now that the Windsor case is decided and Section 3 of DOMA is gone, it's a no-brainer. Civil unions can't possibly be the same as marriage when you don't get the federal benefits if you're in a civil union, but you do get them if you're in a marriage.
Well, there is some debate about how civil unions will be handled by the federal government,
We'll get to that.
which led to Governor Chris Christie's legal team going into court and saying, you know what? You, the court, said years ago that civil unions could be equivalent to marriage. Well, you didn't exactly say that, but that's what the legislature interpreted what you said as. So instead of legalizing marriage, which you really don't need to do because, you know, we've said civil unions are equivalent to marriages, even though it didn't pan out that way. Ignore that. We said it, so it's okay. So really what you should be doing is you should be going to the federal government and saying, make civil unions have the same benefits as marriage. Then it'll be all taken care of.
The other thing they went to the court and said was, you know, let's not rush things. We need to think about this a lot more before we make any sort of decisions or changes.
Forget this summary judgment stuff. Just because we've had years of experience and we've done these studies and we've had the DOMA case and all of that, forget it. We need to have another full trial here in New Jersey to settle these issues.
This is Christie's lackeys flailing around at any possible straw they can grasp at to avoid the painfully obvious conclusion that civil unions in a post-DOMA era or post-DOMA Section 3 era cannot possibly be the same as a marriage.
So annoying. Well, on the civil unions versus marriage front, there's a very interesting case going on in in Kentucky, sorry. A lesbian in Kentucky is in a civil union with her partner. And lesbian number one killed a man who she says raped her. The prosecutor says, I want her civilly unioned partner to testify against her. And the accused murderer says, partners are not, spouses are not supposed to testify against their spouses. And the prosecutor says, oh no, it's just a civil union. That's not equivalent.
This is in Kentucky where there are no same-sex marriages.
Exactly. None of this or civil unions are recognized. They were civilly unioned elsewhere, maybe even in New Jersey. And this is all playing out in this whole complicated thing in this murder case in Kentucky. And with any luck, we have the local news report on this.
Same-sex couple is at the center of a legal debate tonight. Can they be forced to testify against each other?
This all stems back from a case dating to 2011, and Bobby Joe Clary is charged with murder in connection with the death of George Murphy. He died from massive head trauma. Prosecutors say Clary's partner, Geneva Case, heard her admit to killing Murphy.
Now they want Geneva Case to testify. WHAS 11's Gene Kang joins us live with a story gaining national attention. He spoke exclusively to Case. Gene?
Melissa and Doug, good evening. It all boils down to this civil union certificate and what it means in a legal court of law and to a judge. Will Geneva Case have to testify against someone that she calls her own wife? Bobby Joe Clary says she was raped by George Murphy before hitting him over the head with a hammer in self-defense. Charged with murder, she faces the death penalty if convicted. Heart-wrenching for her lesbian partner, Geneva Case.
It's very stressful. I wish she could come home. There's nothing we can do, though, right now.
Prosecutors believe she knows what happened to Murphy in October 2011 and wants her to take the stand in a jury trial because of this vital information from a police interview.
Geneva Case observes blood on the interior of the van. Geneva Case follows the defendant to 4909 Corridon Pike in New Albany, where the van is left.
Current Kentucky law gives husband and wife the right not to take the stand against each other. Clary and Case have a same-sex union in Vermont. Kentucky bans same-sex marriages, but their lawyers argued today they should have the same spousal privilege and equal protection under the law.
It's a real marriage to us. We went there, we got married.
13 states plus Washington, D.C. allow same-sex marriage. Laws have changed since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Prop 8 and DOMA at the federal level. That's the issue on the table. Will the civil union be considered as a legal marriage?
The United States Supreme Court has spoken that equal protection does, in fact, protect gay and lesbian couples. The Defense of Marriage Act opinion that was offered earlier this summer by the United States Supreme Court is binding on this court.
Our position is that the marital privilege only applies to a valid marriage, and these two parties do not have a valid marriage.
I don't really think that the Commonwealth had much of a response today. They argued that it's up to the Attorney General's office to deal with the constitutional issues.
While Case spoke to me one-on-one about the woman she calls her wife, she says she's also standing up for equal rights.
It's my right not to have to do it.
Well, Attorney General Jack Conaway will review this case, and a judge will have a ruling by August 16th, if not earlier. The murder trial is expected to start at the end of next month. Reporting live from the Judicial Center, Gene Kang, WHAS 11 News.
Two things about this. One, absolutely fascinating, and what a great, intelligent, sophisticated report, and that Kentucky, which, as you point out, has no protections, would be considering this as a live issue. But second, have we forgotten George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin? A woman is raped and kills her rapist in self-defense and now is facing the death penalty, but he can pull out a gun and shoot Trayvon Martin and claim self-defense, and everybody says, oh, absolutely, you know, he should have the right to defend himself.
You really don't want to get me started on Trayvon Martin. You don't want to go there.
Well, I don't want people who really are, you know, attacked and raped and abused like this to not have the same defense available to them that George Zimmerman had. You know, if you want to wonder about the equality of the laws, this is a perfect little example as far as I'm concerned.
Well, just to follow up on the whole issue of civil unions versus marriages, a California representative in the House of Representatives has introduced a bill to have the Social Security Administration recognize same-sex couples in civil unions and domestic partnerships and give them the same benefits as married couples, which would kind of make Chris Christie's argument true if it passed, but it doesn't have a prayer because the House of Representatives is dominated by Republicans.
Yes,
so.
but thank you, Linda Sanchez, for proposing that. We mentioned last week that marriages had started in Minnesota after the voters, after that was legalized last year, and marriages also, same-sex marriages, started in Rhode Island last week on August 1st.
There's a challenge against the law banning same-sex marriages in Illinois, filed by several couples. The right wing, which is trying to stop that because the state attorney general won't defend the case, filed for a summary dismissal of the case, and so oral arguments have begun in Illinois around that.
And there will be a march on the capital of Springfield, Illinois in October for marriage rights as the legislature opens its next session. Also, back to Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic has announced that its employees, it was giving domestic partner benefits to employees with same-sex partners. No longer unless you are actually married. They have laid down the law. Now, there was a similar thing that happened in Massachusetts when they were the first to legalize same-sex marriage, and there are some companies that are now drawing the line and saying that's how we treat heterosexual couples, that's how we're going to treat same-sex couples. I'm sure if Andy were here, he would be blowing a gasket and saying, how about domestic partner benefits for domestic partners across the board, same-sex, opposite-sex?
I can't channel Andy on that one. I kind of think fair is fair as long as everybody's treated
Yeah,
equally.
but I agree with that, but I think the whole point is to expand the universe of people who can get benefits.
Expansion is good. In Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker, whom we loathe if you're a liberal like me and progressive like Ann, as if there's a difference.
Yeah.
He says that gay marriage won't be coming anytime soon to Wisconsin. Not a big shock considering how right-wing he is, but the fact that he merely acknowledges that it may happen is something.
But marriage is coming in a renegade fashion to Pennsylvania. We've been telling you about what's happened in Montgomery County, where officials there decided they were going to go ahead and let same-sex couples marry. Pennsylvania officials have now formally filed to stop those marriages. But meanwhile, in Allegheny County, the mayor of the town of Braddock has decided he's jumping on the renegade bandwagon, and he has started performing same-sex marriages. So congratulations to the town officials in Pennsylvania who've decided to take this into their own hands. And all the couples acknowledge that these marriages may be invalidated, but it's a way to push the issue. There is a lawsuit by the ACLU in Pennsylvania that's been filed for marriage rights.
But there's been no word from the Pennsylvania courts yet in response to any of this, so we're waiting to see.
By the way, if you are losing track of what's going on all over the country, state by state, on these marriage cases, there is a website that can bring you up to date on everything, published by Nan Hunter, a longtime heroic lesbian lawyer, activist, and expert on these issues. And she writes a blog called hunterofjustice.com, and she has a summary of what's going on across the nation, so that's a good place to catch up.
Just as a postscript, John Kerry has announced that post-DOMA visa policies for same-sex couples are in effect. And 2 days later, in the Netherlands, the first of those visas was issued to Francois Conradi. So congratulations to Francois.
In Glendora, California, a Catholic high school, St. Lucy's Priory, fired a gay teacher because he married his partner. Ken Bencomo had worked at the school for 17 years. He had been out at the school for many years. Everybody knew him and loved him as a gay man. But when he got married, the school said, even though we've known you're gay and have kept you working here for all these years, you have now gone public with this because your wedding was announced in the paper, so you are fired.
He's living in violation of his contract and in contravention of Catholic doctrine.
Well, interesting that when he was living in double sin because he was unmarried, that didn't bother them. But when he publicly gets married, suddenly he's fired. Well, the students are up in arms. They've gathered 10,000 signatures to object to this, but I don't think he's getting his job back.
at the newly Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post, there was an editorial that really took President Obama to task for not issuing an executive order in requiring contractors doing business with the federal government to guarantee non-discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, something that the community has been pushing for a while. And maybe you can give me your opinion as to why you think he hasn't done it yet.
Well, what his...
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, what his spokesman keeps saying is, we prefer the legislative solution. I think they honestly think that maybe they can get it through the Congress and that would be better than an executive order. And they continue to be in this tussle with the right wing, and I think they continue to think that they should be conciliatory rather than confrontational for the most part. I don't agree with them, but that seems to be their general approach to life, that we can work this out, we can get it done, we're taking the slow, low road, trust us. And they, you know, they got Don't Ask, Don't Tell repealed. They think this is the way to proceed. And I hope they're right, but it is annoying. And you know how all these, how their lawsuits, and the right wing is freaked out about these lawsuits because people who own businesses and are public accommodations and should be serving all people equally, but then they develop some religious conscience that, no, I can't make your cake because you're a same-sex couple and I'm a religious fanatic. The Betty Crocker Company in Minnesota has offered to make cakes for same-sex couples.
Excellent.
Thank you, Betty. They donated cakes to the first 3 couples married. And in Alabama, a judge has given a lesbian mother full visitation rights with her 4 kids. The kids are in the custody of her ex-husband, who's in the military. They lived in Seattle, and he got transferred by the military to Alabama. She followed them to Alabama because she wanted to stay in touch with the kids, even though she doesn't have custody rights. And she went to court to get visitation rights. And she's a lesbian. She has a female partner. And of course, same-sex couples or gay people don't have a lot of rights in Alabama. But the judge in Alabama said, yes, she should have full rights to visitation with the kids, no prohibitions about overnight stays with the same-sex partner in the house. So that's a very progressive decision by the Alabama court.
Excellent. In Washington, a whole bunch of Senate confirmations happened, several of them of gay people without any sort of objection, including John Berry as the new ambassador to Australia. What hasn't come up yet is the ambassador's post to the Dominican Republic.
Because the church in the Dominican Republic is freaking out that old gay Wally Brewster has been nominated to be the ambassador there. But gay ambassadors were confirmed to Denmark and Spain, as well as Australia, and as the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division, which is a big job at the Justice Department. And congratulations to Washington State Senator on the other coast, Washington State, Ed Murray, who has been a gay leader in Washington State for a long time, had a lot to do with legalizing same-sex marriage there. He's running for mayor of Seattle. They had a big, I guess, non-denominational primary.
Right.
Everybody's in the same boat, and the 2 top vote getters then
go on to a runoff in November.
Exactly, and he looks like the top vote getter. There are a lot of mail-in ballots still to be counted because they do a lot of the voting by mail-in there, but he's the top guy at the moment. Certainly should be in the final 2. Good for Ed Murray. Oh, and we told you some time ago that the ex-gay crowd had scheduled a big conference and rally in Washington, D.C. and canceled it then because, you know, we're mean to them or something. But they held an event anyway, and how many people showed up? Less than 10. Because of all this homo-fascism and indoctrination in the media, ex-gays aren't given a fair shake.
Well, somewhere where they need more homo-indoctrination, apparently, is Florida, where a young mother, Katie Victoria, excuse me, I hope I haven't mangled the pronunciation.
I think it's Victoria.
Yeah, it's got an odd spelling. She was in the local Walmart. Her son had been playing dress-up. which he does often. He happened to have a pink headband still on as she wheeled him around the aisles. And this guy walks up out of nowhere, a total stranger, and knocks the headband off his head and says, "You'll thank me later." And when the mother said, "Keep your hands off my son," he jumped in and said, "Oh, well, your son is a F word for gay people, and he'll get shot for it one day."
Thanks.
Priceless.
Thank you, mister.
Priceless.
If you go back to the Prop 8 case, you'll remember the Courage campaign in California has been very big in work around that, and particularly in inventing this thing called Prop 8 Trial Tracker that blogged from inside the courtroom when they were doing the whole big Prop 8 trial. And the guy who was running the Courage campaign is this guy, Rick Jacobs, who's a longtime political activist and consultant in California. And he's just been hired by the new mayor of LA to be deputy chief of staff for operations. It's nice to have an activist in that position.
Excellent. Unfortunately, bad news for transgendered people. A survey has found that they are 20% in the military, and 29% of transgendered women have served in the military, but they face, obviously, the greatest amount of discrimination in the military.
But there's a big new grant from the Palm Center to study what's going on with transgendered people in the military or as veterans.
And I think the idea is to build a case of data to eventually enlarge Don't Ask, Don't Tell to include transgendered people.
Exactly. All right, should we go back to other international news?
Sure. Rip through that.
Okay, there's a British developer who's building an LGBT retirement community in southwest France. There's an idea. Keep your eyes on that.
In Ecuador, they've launched a campaign for same-sex marriage, and it's being led by Pamela Troya and her girlfriend, Gabriela Correa. And she got into a Twitter fight a while ago with the president of Ecuador over this very issue. So
it's going to be a little contentious there. But Thailand and Vietnam are both moving towards consideration of legalizing same-sex marriage, and that looks like it may be a little smoother ride. And in New South Wales, Australia, they may become the first territory of Australia to legalize same-sex marriage, since the administration of the country said that individual states can do it. So they look like they may be the first.
Well, we're down under the Australian Christian Democratic Party is promoting the discrimination that heterosexual couples face because they pay 29% more money than male couples in taxes. So, you know, the terrible blight of discrimination against heterosexuals is being challenged there.
Hey, legalized marriage, we'll all pay the same taxes. A little scandal brewing in Britain. Andy will tell us more about this when he gets back. The Prime Minister there, David Cameron, who's the conservative but progressive on same-sex marriage, has hired as a political consultant Obama's big guy, Jim Messina, who 10 years ago, when he was working for Senator Max Baucus of Montana, did a really bad anti-gay, gay-bashing, gay baiting commercial against Baucus's opponent. And we knew about that, and then we sort of got over it when he elected Obama, when Messina worked so hard for Obama. But this is suddenly all bursting out again in Britain that this guy is a big homophobe for having done this commercial 10 years ago for Max Baucus. Quite interesting. And in Italy, a court there has agreed that transgender people can have their sex changed on their identification papers and official documents without having to go through surgery. So that's progressive. And
one bit of bad news from Alberta, Canada, where a bunch of rainbow flags were burned outside of Fort McMurray, which is near a northern Alberta city.
They were holding their first Pride Parade. Marriages have begun in Uruguay. The waiting period actually was waived for a cancer patient there. And what else? Robert Mugabe got reelected as president of Zimbabwe by promising to behead gay men. The UN Commission for Human Rights is announcing a big free and equal public education campaign to combat bigotry. There's another target for us in the Russia campaign.
I just want to laugh about the fact about how we were so blasé about the fact that that Mugabe got reelected with the promise of beheading gay men.
Yeah.
For him, that's par for the course.
Yeah, well, he also rigged the election. Yeah. Let's move on to AIDS and health news. We have only a few minutes left. I want to give you a moment for movie reviews. Governor Cuomo in New York signed a bill put forth by out gay legislators Brad Hoylman and Danny O'Donnell, which will allow qualified pharmacists and certified nurse practitioners to administer a meningitis vaccine because the men who have sex with men population seems to have been hit particularly with a deadly meningitis epidemic in the last few years.
And unfortunately in London, new HIV cases continue to soar amongst gay men, an increase of 21% over the 2011 number, and that's likely to increase as the statistics get refined.
86 members of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives have sent a letter to Health and Human Services Secretary Sebelius asking for an end to the ban on blood donations by men who have sex with men. This is a campaign that's been going on for years.
And not so great reviews, certainly not from a New York Times reviewer of the New York Historical Society's exhibition on the first 5 years of the AIDS crisis.
It leaves out a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
sort of
kind of whitewash
yeah.
was the term used.
Department of Justice has settled a complaint against Barracks clinics in Michigan and Pennsylvania, which do bariatric weight loss surgery. They had refused HIV-positive patients for surgery. They will now pay a fine, do a lot of training, and take HIV-positive patients.
Entertainment news?
Yes.
Actor Ben Whishaw has confirmed that he's gay. He's a British actor. You may remember him from the latest James Bond movie where he played the new
Skyfall.
Skyfall.
Yeah. Turns out he got a civil union a year ago with his Australian partner, composer Mark Bradshaw. Elton John will be performing in Russia the first week in December. He performs there a lot. We'll undoubtedly go after him, but don't forget he performed at Rush Limbaugh's wedding.
Raven-Symoné from The Bill Cosby Show and That's So Raven has come out on Twitter as gay.
Ellen DeGeneres has been picked to host the Oscars next year, I think also in February around the same time as the Olympics. She did it in 2007. They're bringing her back. They didn't like, what's his name, McDonald, who did it last year. He was a little too outre. Raven-Symoné, did you just say Raven-Symoné came out? Yes, Neil Patrick Harris is going to star in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. She says, I'm freaking out about playing a transgender German rock star. How do you prepare for that? Well, you could take it seriously.
We've got under a minute. Shall I squeeze in a movie
Quick.
review? All right. You can go to my website, designed by my attractive husband, Scott Holman, and read more, cfcooper.net. But these are two recommendations, or a no recommendation and a yes recommendation. The no recommendation is for the new Ryan Gosling movie. Even though I know he's very hot, Only God Forbids, terrible, don't bother. But you must see the documentary, 20 Feet from Stardom, about backup singers. It is fantastic.
Yes,
it will get nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if it'll win yet. It depends on the
so.
competition. But it will get nominated, so make sure you see that one. It is fantastic.
Thank you, Chris, for filling in for 2 weeks. You've been terrific. And I'm sorry, we're here in the summer of news. And everybody come to the Queer Nation meeting Wednesday, 7 p.m., Community Center, 208 West 13th Street. Andy will be back next week. We will see you then. Thank you. Good night.